8 Sleep makes a product that is amazing, which I love. It's called the Pod, and it fits around your existing mattress and cools down your bed so you can sleep better. They just released the newest model called the Pod 4 Ultra, which in addition to cooling down or heating up your bed, can even lift up your head when you're snoring so you can breathe better. It's incredible. To get $350 off, go to 8sleep.com/Pacman and use code Pacman. The link is in the description. Welcome to the show. Later on in the program, when we look at some viewer emails, I'm going to talk about some pretty consistent criticism that I'm receiving. Not unfair, but I would argue a little bit misplaced, that I'm not being optimistic enough about Kamala Harris's chances in November. You know, yesterday I was speaking here at the conference in Las Vegas with a bunch of other people, Sam Cedar, Farron Cousins, and others, about the polling situation and the indicators we have as to what's going to happen. And I want to outline for you what I see as the biggest red flag right now in the polling. Now, let me make a couple of disclaimers. After this segment, I'm not going to do any more polling stuff today other than just responding to that email at the end of the show. Ultimately, I don't believe that how I talk about how the polling looks has any impact on the eventual results. I think fundamentally, this program is not big enough, and I'm mostly preaching to people who are already planning to vote for Kamala Harris that I don't see that the way I couch things would really impact results. And number three, I don't think it makes any sense to say we should act more optimistic than the data say because what? Okay, so with that out of the way, here for me is the most concerning polling sign that I see in this race. Real Clear Politics, whatever you think of them, allows you to look not just at what does polling look like today, but what did polling look like for Biden-Trump on this same day in 2020, and what did polling look like for Clinton-Trump on this same day in 2016. And I hate to tell you, it doesn't look particularly good. Right now, Kamala Harris leads by 2 nationally. On this day, in 2020, Biden led by 9, and on this day in 2016, Hillary Clinton led by almost 5. If you look at the swing states, I hate that this is what's going on, but you see the exact same sort of a phenomenon. Right now, Trump is leading by 1.4 in Arizona. On this day in 2020, Biden led by almost 3. And that is a very concerning sign. We'll go through these quickly. In Nevada, Harris is winning by 1, but Biden was winning by 6 at this point. Harris is winning by under 1 in Wisconsin, but Biden was leading by 5.5 in 2020. In Michigan, Kamala Harris is leading by 0.5 point, but on this day in 2020, Biden was leading by almost 7 in Michigan. Pennsylvania, Trump is up by a fraction of a point. Biden led by 7 at this point in 2020. In North Carolina, Trump's up 0.5 point. Biden was winning there by almost 2. And in Georgia, Donald Trump is winning by 1.5, and Georgia was a tie at this point in 2020. So what does this mean? If you believe that this is in any way in the bag for Kamala Harris, look at how drastically she is underperforming the 2020 polling on this day in 2020. Now, there is a caveat here. We learned after the fact that 2020 polling significantly underrepresented in some states Donald Trump's level of support. Trump did better than the polling I showed you from 2020. You know, there were states there that Biden was winning by 7, for example, Pennsylvania. Biden did not ultimately win by 7. So last time around, there was a reality that Trump's level of support, he was losing, right? He did lose, he was losing, but his level of support to some degree was sort of undercounted by some of that swing state polling. But the takeaway here is it's really hard to look at the polling and say Kamala Harris is doing better than Biden did, or even as good as Biden did, as well as Biden did. And so my prediction continues to be, I think the most likely scenario, not by a lot, but by a little, the most likely scenario, plurality outcome, is that Harris wins, but by a smaller margin than Biden in 2020. That's already dangerous and scary in terms of what it might do to MAGA in terms of being able to successfully convince people that it was rigged, stolen, or whatever. I think there is the next likely outcome, a narrow Trump win. And then the third most likely outcome, I believe, is a Kamala Harris blowout. I don't see any real possibility for a Trump blowout. I think if Trump wins, it'll be narrow. I think most likely if Harris wins, it'll be narrow. But there is this possibility of a Kamala Harris sort of landslide blowout victory. So to anyone who thinks that I am being too negative, understand and acknowledge Kamala Harris is doing worse today in every single one of the battleground states and nationally compared to how Biden was doing on this very same day in 2020, and in most of the cases, doing worse than Hillary Clinton was doing on this very same day in 2016, and Hillary Clinton lost. So what do? Well, we stop saying the problem is negativity. We're being realistic here. We're being realistic, and if we get the turnout, if we make sure people understand the stakes, and they make sure they're registered and they go out and vote over the next 20-something days, then Kamala Harris wins. It is not by any means a guaranteed outcome. We suspected it would happen, and it did. Donald Trump exploding after getting metaphorically caught in bed with Vladimir Putin with regard to post-presidency meetings and sending Putin COVID tests when they were difficult to find in the United States. Let me remind you what this is about, then I'll tell you Trump's reaction. Earlier this week, I told you on the program that in Bob Woodward's forthcoming book, Woodward reveals that in the 3.5 years after Donald Trump's presidency ended, he had 7 phone calls with Vladimir Putin. They were previously undisclosed, Trump mentioning, "I've spoken to Putin" during the debate, which made people wonder, what the hell is he talking about? We didn't know about that. And indeed, Bob Woodward says, yes, they've spoken 7 times. In addition to that, Bob Woodward reveals that during the time of the peak of the COVID pandemic, when there were tests were very difficult to find in the United States, Trump had tests sent to Putin for what's being described as personal use. Now, I don't think this was necessarily all Putin personally shoving the swabs into his nose, but whatever personal use means to Putin, maybe for political favors, maybe for friends and family, who the hell knows? But that's the reporting from Bob Woodward. As predicted, this sent Trump for a complete and total loop, Trump not taking it well. The Trump campaign putting out a statement attributed to Communications Director Stephen Chung, but I think as soon as you see the language here, you will see that this is very much Trumpian language, not Chung language. Trump reacting to this reporting by saying, quote, "None of these made-up stories by Bob Woodward are true and are the work of a truly demented and deranged man who suffers from a debilitating case of Trump derangement syndrome. Woodward is an angry little man and is clearly upset because President Trump is successfully suing him because of the unauthorized publishing of recordings he made previously. President Trump gave him absolutely no access for this trash book that either belongs in the bargain bin of the fiction section of a discount bookstore or used as toilet tissue. Trump would know about toilet tissue. Woodward is a total sleazebag who has lost it mentally, and he's slow, lethargic, incompetent, and overall a boring person with no personality." Now, again, that's being attributed to Trump's communications director, Stephen Chung. I very much question whether Stephen Chung wrote that, given that it is verbatim the way Trump writes. Every projection is a confession. It's Trump who's demented, not Bob Woodward. It's Trump who's deranged, not Bob Woodward. And they recognize that this information is terrible before the election. I don't believe, on Fox they're saying, is the hurricane the October surprise? I'm not characterizing whether any of these things are October surprises, but this isn't a favorable release of information for Trump in the context of trying to win just 3.5 weeks from now. And at this point, every reaction from Trump, no matter what comes out, civilly liable for sexual assault, convicted, scared to be on 60 Minutes, scared to debate again. It's blah, blah, blah fake news, blah, blah, blah election interference, I'm a victim. I'm a martyr. No one's been treated less fairly than me. Now, Donald Trump also appeared on Newsmax for an interview with Rob Schmidt. The clip has been deleted from the internet. I wasn't able to find it. But this issue of Bob Woodward came up during Trump's interview with Rob Schmidt. And Trump again just went for ad hominem personal attacks. I think Woodward is a real jerk. I think he's out of it. Trump saying about Bob Woodward. Now, Trump and his campaign have also denied that any of this is true with regard to the COVID tests, but we now have heard from Russia's Kremlin that yes, Donald Trump did send Putin COVID tests at the height of the pandemic. We'll talk about that on the bonus show, and you have to remember that Trump lies all the time, and the Kremlin lies all the time. So we are in a situation where we are forced to decide which habitual liar do we believe this time. One of them must be telling the truth in the sense that Trump is saying he didn't send COVID tests. Putin is saying Trump did send COVID tests. Either he did or he didn't. And so one of the habitual liars is telling the truth. We're going to try to sort of unpack it on the bonus show. So that'll be later. Make sure you're subscribed at joinpacman.com. Make sure you are subscribed on the YouTube channel at youtube.com/The David Pakman Show, as we are really at the end here of the 2024 election, 20-something days to go. We'll know the outcome soon, and then we will regroup and figure out what's next. Our sponsor, 8 Sleep, is the creator of the Pod, which can be added to your existing mattress like a fitted sheet to automatically cool down or warm up each side of your bed, and in turn improve your sleep quality dramatically. Meet their newest model, 8 Sleep's Pod 4 Ultra. It cools, it heats, and now it can elevate your head automatically. Pod 4 Ultra can cool down each side of the bed to 20 degrees below room temperature, keeping you and your partner cool even in a heat wave. The Pod can even detect your snoring and automatically lift your head by a few degrees to improve that airflow and stop your or your partner's snoring. There is nothing else like it on the market. I've been using 8 Sleep products for a long time, and it's one of the few things in my house that I couldn't go without now. Pod 4 Ultra also introduces an adjustable base that fits between your mattress and your bed frame to add reading and sleeping positions to help you unwind at night. Go to 8sleep.com/Pakman and use code Pakman to get $350 off the Pod 4 Ultra. The link is in the description. If you stay on top of the news, you follow politics and elections, why not win cash for it? Manifold is the app and website where you can win cash for predicting what will happen next in politics, and it is free to play. Questions like, will Trump win the presidential election? Will Kamala Harris flip a state? Will political commentator Destiny appear on Joe Rogan's podcast? If you predict correctly, you win play money called Mana or Sweep Cash. One Sweep Cash is redeemable for a US dollar. So if you predict right, you can turn it into cash. And the platform gives you free Mana and Sweep Cash to play with every single day. Go to manifold.markets/Pakman and you'll get free extra Sweep Cash just for signing up to start you on your journey. No purchase necessary to win cash or prizes. If you want to go bigger, you can use my link to get 40 extra Sweep Cash when you spend $20 on Mana. If you put that 40 Sweep Cash on Trump losing the election at the current odds, you win 70 Sweep Cash if he loses, redeemable for $70 cash. You must be a U.S. resident, 18 or older. See terms and conditions. The link is in the description. I am absolutely flattered and humbled, I would say, by the outpouring of support that I've seen over the last week, both in terms of people signing up for memberships at joinpacman.com, people pre-ordering my forthcoming book, The Echo Machine. Truly just unbelievable. I want to thank everybody and remind you that we are audience supported. Everything we do here really is independent at its core. We don't have some big media conglomerate or overarching infrastructure that on the upside funds the program, and on the downside has 4 different editors telling me what to say each day. We don't have either of those things. The upside is I decide what we do. I decide what we say. The downside is that we are subject to the support of the audience, and the most direct way to support us is by signing up at joinpacman.com. I hope you will consider it. MAGA is furious as Kamala Harris has been doing interview after interview over the last few days, 60 Minutes. She'll be doing The View, was on Stephen Colbert, the Call Her Daddy podcast, and Howard Stern. Now, we're going to look at some clips from the Howard Stern interview, and this has generated so much controversy. Every time that Howard Stern interviews someone and reveals his preferences for left-leaning elected officials, the MAGA people, the Magadonians, the Magapotamians, they come out of the woodwork and they just attack Howard Stern. They go, Howard hasn't been relevant since he went to satellite radio. Or Howard's show isn't funny anymore. Or Howard now is just doing D-list interviews. They get furious when Howard says, hey, I don't like what Trump's offering, and here's what I prefer. And in this case, it's Kamala Harris. Now, as many of you know, Howard Stern has expressed publicly he's a fan of the David Pakman Show. I've been listening to Howard for decades, and I think it's fantastic that Howard is speaking out politically. And as I've said before, the marketplace of ideas will determine whether he has an audience. If you don't like what he has to say, if you find it disgusting that he supports Kamala Harris over Donald Trump, just don't listen to him. Vote with your dollars, as you always say the free market says that you should. I thought that this interview was excellent. Here is a clip of Kamala Harris explaining what it is about Donald Trump that would be such a disaster for women in this country, and she explains it well. Take a look at this.
Something drives me nuts with Obama's presidency. He had the opportunity to appoint someone to the Supreme Court. Mitch McConnell goes, F you, you're not appointing anyone. How can this be? The president could not appoint a Supreme Court justice. I don't want Donald Trump and his party deciding. I don't want Clarence Thomas deciding.
He hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court to do exactly what they did. Take away the right of an individual to make decisions about their own body. Like, I ask people to take a step back. Let's just think about it this way. Whatever your gender.
Right.
And it's not about abortion. You have basically now a system that says you as an individual do not have the right to make a decision about your own body. The government has the right to make that decision for you. So regardless of how you feel about abortion, think about what that means. You know, the strength of America includes that we have been committed as Americans, it's part of our spirit, to the expansion of rights.
Right.
And for the first time, we're seeing a restriction of rights, fundamental rights, including what could be more fundamental than to make decisions about your own body. And that's what has happened. And Howard, to your point, look, this issue is not about trying to convert people, right?
Right.
Because one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree.
Right.
The government shouldn't be telling her what to do with her body. She will talk with her priest, her pastor, her rabbi, her imam, but not the government.
This was a very good interview. I encourage everyone to check it out. And what I found most interesting about it, and I'm going to address in a moment that Howard was fawning over Kamala, as some people wrote to me and said, David, it's embarrassing, Howard fawning over. What I thought was really good about this interview is that Kamala Harris's personality comes out, and I think it comes off positively. I experienced this personally when I went to the White House in March, right around the State of the Union, and met with Vice President Harris. And the person I saw there was very different from that which at the time we were getting through media interviews. Now, I think since she's become much better at being interviewed and comes off in a much more personable and sort of erudite, didactic, gregarious, and interesting way. But the Howard Stern interview was very good as far as that went. Here is another clip from this interview. Kamala Harris talking to Howard Stern about leadership and America. And I'll tell you in a moment what I found great about this.
To your point, doesn't support our friend Ukraine, doesn't support, therefore, something America should always, and has always, by the way, been a champion of, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity, which means the importance of standing against anyone who tries to take another nation by force.
Right.
That's what we stand for as Americans, that you don't do that. And if you do that to our friends, we're going to stand with our friends. You're getting played. And some would say, look, I grew up in the neighborhood. Some would say you're getting punked.
Yeah.
If you stand in favor of somebody who's an adversary over your friends on principles that we all agree on. And you look at it, it's not only that. He says he's going to be a dictator on day one. Understand what dictators do. They jail journalists. They put people who are protesting in the street in jail.
He said he thinks he wants to go after Jimmy Kimmel, a comedian. He wants to go after Stephen Colbert and Seth Meyers. Even if someone had said years ago when I remember presidential races, if someone said, "Oh, Kamala Harris isn't a black woman," they would have been out of the. They would have been out of the.
Yeah.
That would have been it. Would have been over. I mean, how do you challenge that?
Well,
What do you do with that?
But back to the point.
So what I think is best there is that increasingly, I don't really like seeing politics as good versus evil, as dark versus light, or some of the ways that politics is framed, I increasingly find distasteful. It is impossible to pay attention to this election and not see the stark contrast between the apocalyptic negative vision being put out there by Trump and the positive vision being put out there by Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Later in the show today, I'm going to play clips for you of Donald Trump being interviewed by comedian Andrew Schultz. And one of the things that Trump says is, I don't even think you can say America is great right now. Greatness of a country is a kind of a squishy thing, but there was a time when Republicans would never say that. They would always say, America is great. It's the greatest country, they would say. But maybe there are problems that I would like to solve differently. I don't think Democrats are the best stewards, but America is great. Now it's straight up apocalyptic. America's terrible. We're humiliated. Economy's bad. This is bad. That's bad. Kamala Harris did a really good job of putting out that positive vision. And I think that it was a really great thing. Now, let me briefly address, before we get to healthcare policy, from the interview. There are people who have criticized this interview as a fawning interview. Howard Stern didn't hold back. He was just fawning over Kamala Harris and blah, blah, blah. So listen to me very, very carefully. Howard Stern is not a journalist. Howard Stern is not a reporter. He doesn't pretend to be. He's biased about everything he talks about on his show, in the sense that he's not neutral. If he's talking about a reality show, or he's talking about whether a woman is or isn't attractive, right? The sort of stuff that maybe he was known for some time ago, whatever. The program is a reflection of Howard Stern's opinion. He doesn't pretend to be neutral. Hannity, when he does the same stupid softball interview of Trump day in and day out for years now, he pretends to be neutral and objective when in fact he is not. Howard Stern doesn't do that. He has made it clear, Howard has, that he thinks Trump's a disaster and Kamala Harris is the direction we should go in. And so that's what it is. He's not pretending to be a news guy. Howard pretends to do news and then in fact does propaganda. Howard has decided, I want Kamala Harris to win. I'm going to say that. He's overtly trying to help her. It's not neutral. And if you don't like it, just like if you don't like the fact that I'm advocating for Kamala Harris to win on this program, I don't have a neutral perspective, you don't have to watch. I don't think that that is a problem with this type of interview. 60 Minutes is different. 60 Minutes claims to be something different. And that's why Trump didn't do it. That's the fascinating part. Kamala Harris did and subjected herself to fact-checking on 60 Minutes. Trump turned around and went home because it would have been too tough of an interview. Now, one just final thing here. There was a very interesting moment. I encourage you to check out the whole interview, but there was an interesting moment during the Howard Stern interview where the topic of Project 2025, Social Security, Medicare, the Affordable Care Act came up, and I want to play a little bit of that for you here.
Like I announced today, what my plan to make sure that Medicare covers at-home elder care, because probably a lot of your listeners are in that sandwich generation.
Oh, my God.
Where they're taking care of young kids and their elder parents.
My mother's 97 years old. I'm not even going to tell you how old I am. I know you think I'm 30, but I am so old, and I have an old mother, 97 years old. The cost is, people don't know this yet. If they're not taking care of somebody elderly, it will bankrupt you.
Absolutely
It will.
right.
You got,
Or your
yep,
parent will not get the care they need, or you're going to have to leave your job,
right.
which means you're going to reduce your income to, depending on what it is, almost nothing in terms of your household income to do what you want to do, which is to give your parent the dignity they deserve with care.
And can you imagine if Medicare is impacted, or Obamacare for that matter? I
And
mean, what are
look at
people
what
thinking?
Donald Trump has been talking about for years. And look at his Project 2025. People should Google it. I mean, what they're doing and what he's talking about in terms of attacking Social Security, Medicare, undoing the Affordable Care Act, and which means the insurance companies can come back and deny people with pre-existing conditions. All of this is very real and very much at stake in this election.
What was really good about this part is that Kamala Harris did a good job. And again, this just goes to, she didn't used to be that good at being interviewed. If you go back 18 months, she has gotten way better. She wraps together the connections between access to health care, Obamacare and the legacy of the Obama administration there, Social Security and Medicare, which Republicans would love to cut or privatize, except then they will go, no, we would never do that. It's Democrats who want to cut it. And the connection to Project 2025. She's getting much better at explaining in coherent terms the relationships between a lot of these different political issues. So check it out. And also check out what we're going to look at next, which was a very different interview. Ben Shapiro interviewed Donald Trump, and it was so disastrous that at times even Ben Shapiro looked sort of confused and laughed nervously, especially when Donald Trump talked about Judaism. Ben Shapiro asked about a family with a hostage in Gaza. And Trump's reaction is always, me, me, me. I'm so great. Trump's reaction was to say, I grew up around a lot of Jewish people. I knew many Jews growing up. Take a look at this.
The family was very grateful to you, obviously, for taking the time to meet with them. And, it was really a meaningful experience. Wonder if you wanted to say something about the situation for that family and the other families like them.
I thought from a religious standpoint, it was so beautiful. I had not been that aware. As you know, I'm not Jewish, but I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood, to put it mildly. With my father being a Brooklyn builder, I knew lots of Jewish people, almost exclusively, if you want to know the truth. But I thought it was a beautiful, it was explained the whole thing and how it worked. And it was very beautiful, ceremonial. And I got to meet the family, and they were great.
There's two parts to this. Trump can't address any issue without somehow making it about himself, but not about himself in a way that is inclusive, in a way that's just egocentric and self-centered. But it's also important to mention that Donald Trump's father, Fred Trump, was in the KKK and was secretly funding the John Birch Society. So it may be true that Donald Trump grew up around Jewish people. It may not. I mean, he grew up in Queens and Manhattan. There are larger Jewish populations there than in much of the country. But the idea that Trump has been this obvious ally to the Jewish community since he was a kid is laughable and pathetic. Donald Trump also told Ben Shapiro that he watched the 60 Minutes interview that Kamala Harris did with on 60 Minutes. And hilariously, in yet another one of these instances where it's like, is Trump talking about himself or someone else? He says she did not answer questions in a way that he thinks is presidential. Take a look.
I watched her. I got to watch last night 60 Minutes. And she answers questions like a child. This is not a president. She's answering questions in the most basic way and getting killed over it. And every time she does an interview, she sounds like a child. She sounds like a person with a very low IQ.
Projection. I don't know what other interpretation there is of this. Trump gets asked questions. He rambles. He talks about himself. He's incoherent. He sometimes uses slurs and epithets or attacks the person asking the question. And he wants to tell us that it's Kamala Harris who can't answer the questions coherently and is speaking like a child. And as an example, Donald Trump in this next clip tries to explain that if he were president right now, Putin never would have invaded Ukraine. And he says it relates to to oil prices, or it's actually because of Trump's lack of presence. It's totally incoherent. I'm trying to unravel and unwrap this. Take a look at what Trump had to say.
Russia and Putin never would have attacked Ukraine ever when I was there. And I talked about it, and it was the apple of his eye. I got along with him very well, which is a good thing, not a bad thing. You know, a lot of people think that's a bad thing. No, that's a great thing. But he never would have attacked under any circumstances. Number one, the oil prices were much lower when I was president, so he didn't have the money to attack. At $40 a barrel, he couldn't attack. At $80, $90, and $100 a barrel, he made a lot of money. So, you know, but it's not even that reason. That was a real reason, but it's not that reason. The reason he wouldn't have attacked was because of me. There is zero chance that he would have attacked. Ukraine today had the right thing happened in the election, and it did not. If the right thing happened, Ukraine today would be fully intact, the cities wouldn't be bombed, and you would have had 2 million or 3 million more people living right now a very nice life. It is so sad to see. And then I have to listen to these people say that, oh, Trump, like they say, Trump's soft on Russia.
So understand the level of projection here, pathetic level of projection. Minutes earlier in this interview, Trump complains Kamala Harris can't answer questions like an adult. She can't answer questions coherently. She can't be a president, given the way she answers questions. And then Trump is thrown for a loop about why is it that Putin did or didn't invade, and was it because of oil prices, or was it because you weren't there or you were there? He cannot answer questions, and people are noticing, and even though it's very clear that Ben Shapiro is trying to be useful to Donald Trump in this interview, even Shapiro has a look on his face like, I don't know that this guy's really helping himself. There is almost no interview that Trump can now safely do with left-wing, right-wing, or sort of neutral media and come out on top. Later in the show, we will look at Trump's interview with comedian Andrew Schultz. It is something else. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time, and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpakman.com, joinpakman.com. All right, this I think you're going to like, assuming it doesn't make you cry. Andrew Schultz is a comedian. I find him to be a pretty funny and smart guy. As far as I knew, he was not a Trump supporter, but interviewed Trump, and it's genuinely hilarious in spite of Trump or despite Trump. Trump was asked the question, what happened to Mike Pence? What happened to Mike Pence? And here is how Trump reacted to that question.
What about Mike Pence? You got anything for Mike Pence?
Well, it's a shame because he and I had a very good relationship.
Hanging out somewhere.
He couldn't cross the line of doing what was right, in my opinion. Some people would disagree with that, but he had the right to go.
Trump sees everything transactionally through the prism of what's good for him and are people just doing what he says. Even though Trump claims to support and defend the Constitution, even though Trump claims to be a supporter of law and order and blah, 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 and we'll get to law and order specifically a little bit later, the only thing that matters is he wanted Mike Pence to do a thing, and Mike Pence didn't do it. And that is the approach that ultimately makes Donald Trump so dangerous when you think about him sitting there at negotiating tables with whoever, whether, it doesn't have to be Putin. I know that Putin is sort of the cartoonish example that's often given. But even with our Western democratic allies in Europe, the total lack of respect for institutions, treaties, agreements, or whatever the U.S. has entered into, simply because it might not be obviously convenient or pleasurable for him, is part of what makes the guy so dangerous. And even at this stage of the game, we've researched it a bunch of times. I have not found any examples of this level of overt hostility between a former president and his former vice president, or even from the supporters of a former president in terms of hostility towards the former vice president of that president. And remember, hang Mike Pence is not exactly a sign of love. Donald Trump talking about how he will weed out the Democrats. And it's very interesting language that he uses. Take a listen.
We've challenged
2000.
Stacey Abrams.
Yeah.
Almost all of the Democrats challenge.
Yeah.
But when we challenge, they say he's a threat to democracy.
Yeah.
These are con artists, and they're very bad for our country.
Yeah.
So I'm going to weed them out. We're going to weed them out. I'll do it in honor of you.
This is another reference to Project 2025. Now, I know, we've heard it a million times. Trump doesn't know anything about Project 2025. Some of the things in it he doesn't even like, and so on and so forth. We know about the number of Project 2025 people that are directly involved with Trump's campaign. Trump has praised the Heritage Foundation chair who developed the Project 2025 framework many times. And of course, the most important thing is that Trump espouses beliefs that coincide directly with what's in Project 2025. And when Trump talks about weeding out Democrats, it's part of this bigger idea that they're going to take perfunctory career bureaucrats who are not acting in a politically partisan way and replace them with overtly partisan actors. Everybody must be fully and completely loyal to Donald Trump as he defines loyalty. Now, then we got to one of the most stunning aspects of what the Trump Republican Party has become. The topic of whether America is great came up. Now, I will be the first to tell you that I find this entire terminology squishy and almost meaningless. What does it mean to be a great country? Is it about our infrastructure? Is it about our systems? Is it about where people at an individual level are or aren't racist or inclusive or sexist? What is greatness? Is it about opportunity? We can talk about that. But there has been a big change among Trump Republicans in terms of how they talk about the supposed greatness of this country. And it is very different from what we used to see among Republicans. Let's take a look at this video clip.
Like my legacy to be is the same as the term MAGA, Make America Great Again. I'm going to make this country great again. It's not a great country right now. It's loaded
It's
up.
always a great country.
It's a great country.
See, that's
It's
why I
always a
disagree.
great country.
Okay, but
The Republicans of the George W. Bush era would have crushed and ostracized anyone who said something like this. Remember, under Bush, it was America's great, this is the best country, and it's always been the best. And it doesn't mean that we believe that or we think that that way of talking about countries even makes sense. But there was something about Republicans 20 years ago where they weren't willing to stoop so low as to say the country sucks just because the person that they voted for might not be president. They weren't willing to do that. Now, you might say I'm kind of painting a rose-colored picture of Republicanism under George W. Bush. No, listen, I disagreed with tax policy, disagreed with education policy, disagreed with foreign policy. That's not what I'm doing. But what I am saying is that there were certain things where, listen, if you do want the country to do well, and you have a difference of opinion when it comes to some policy, and you happen to have lost an election, you don't go out and say the country sucks. You say, I think the country could have systems that work better or different policies or whatever. And that is just, they've moved on from that. Now it's the country straight up sucks. And then finally during this interview, Trump defending his complete and total incoherence with this new phrase he's developed, the weave. When Trump does his borderline dementia rants, where he's going into one topic and another topic and none of it makes any sense, Trump now has started to describe this as doing the weave, where he masterfully weaves together different stories, anecdotes, and ideas. And he tries to explain it to Andrew Schultz, and I don't think it comes off that impressively. Take a look.
And so it's one of those things. I was saying before, though, that, I do a thing called a weave. Yeah. And there are those that are fair that say, this guy is so genius. And then others would say, oh, he rambled. I don't ramble. If I start a story, what you do is you weave things and you do it. You have to have certain things. You need an extraordinary memory because you have to come back to where you started.
Yes.
A weave is only good
They
if
don't
you
give you
come
credit
back.
for that.
Yeah, it's true.
That you could go all the way over here and then
I
get
can
back.
go so far here or there, and I can come back to exactly where I started.
Yeah, so listen, It's up to you to decide. When it sounds like Trump is ranting incoherently, is he ranting incoherently, or are your eyes and ears deceiving you, and it's actually some brilliant rhetorical tool that Trump has figured out? I'm on the it's genuinely incoherent sort of side of the fence, but you can decide for yourself. I want to play for you now one of the most glaring examples of how just because you say you're for law and order doesn't mean that you're really for law and order. I want to remind you before I play this clip of Donald Trump on Newsmax that the Haitian immigrants are in Springfield, Ohio legally through something called temporary protected status that has been in the law for 30 years or more. Here is what Donald Trump had to say about the Haitian migrant population in Springfield that's been the subject of they're eating their dogs, they're eating the cats. The subject of all of that has been the status of those immigrants. Here's what Donald Trump had to say.
To our people. I mean, look at Springfield, where 30,000 illegal immigrants are dropped, and they may have done it through a certain little trick, but they are illegal immigrants as far as I'm concerned. They're destroying the town. They're destroying the whole. They'll end up destroying the state. Yeah. We cannot let this happen. This is the worst president and vice president in the history of our country, and we cannot let them get away with this stuff. They're destroying our.
As far as I'm concerned, Trump says, they are illegal immigrants. As far as I'm concerned, is doing some heavy lifting. It's a little trick. As far as the law goes, they are here legally. What Donald Trump means by as far as I'm concerned, they're here illegally, is he would try to kick them out if he were president. He's already admitted it. He said, if I become president, I will try to, by executive action, kick out the Haitian immigrants who are here legally with temporary protected status. He will try to change the law about temporary protected status. But more importantly, law and order, supporting law and order, is sort of like supporting speech that you don't like, okay? You might not like that this is the law, but it is the law, and so you have to abide by it. Now, you can lobby to have that law changed. If Trump could build consensus around that as president, well, maybe he could have the law changed around temporary protected status. But if you support law and order, you have to say they are here legally. I don't know that I like the program under which they're here, but they are here legally. Instead, Trump says, as far as I'm concerned, they're here illegally, and I'm going to try to deport them if I become president. That's not supporting law and order, not even close. Trump also blaming migrants for inflation during this Newsmax interview. There is nothing Trump can't figure out a way blame on non-white people or people from other countries. In this case, it's both. It's non-white people from other countries. Take a look.
The worst criminals all over the world are being dumped, not just South America, are being dumped into our country. By hundreds of thousands are in our country, and they're in our country now. And you look at Springfield, Ohio, you look at Aurora in Colorado, where the governor has no idea what to do. I mean, they're literally taking over cities, and other cities and towns, even if they haven't arrived yet, are just, I mean, they don't know what is going on. They are so scared. Yeah. They're so worried. And I actually think, Rob, that may be a bigger thing than even the horrible inflation that's, destroying our country.
Yeah. But, and as stated, I mean, one of the biggest problems with inflation is housing prices. You want to know why housing prices keep going up? It's because we have 20 million new people living in this country and they only need a place to live.
Absolutely.
So that's just another side.
That immigration
of it.
is, you're right, that immigration is causing us problems in things like, things like inflation. Yeah. It's driving costs through the roof.
Go together.
It's all paid for by the government. So it's all paid for by the government.
There's no surprise here. No surprise. What we are going to find out very soon in November is whether this sort of narrative and story appeals to people. My hope is that it does not, and that Trump is going to get absolutely crushed. My concern, especially from being here in Vegas around a lot more right-wingers than I'm used to, is that it is resonating with people. Trump also deteriorating as the interview progressed with another one of these, he calls them weaves. I call them borderline demented rants. This one about nuclear.
Yeah.
He actually said, don't go after their nuclear. Well, that's going to be the problem, their nuclear, because they're going to have nuclear soon, and it's going to be a much different world. We're not going to be able to do that. It's just the opposite of what he said. And I said that very strongly. I said, you must be kidding when you did he really say that? Because the question was put that he made that statement. It was just after he made it. And I said, it's just the opposite. Yeah. You have to go just the opposite with Joe. You know, I call him Crooked Joe. I call him Sleepy Joe. But
yeah. So good luck unpacking that. Trump, as usual, making no sense whatsoever. And then finally, when Trump is asked about hurricanes, he ends up ranting about electric vehicles.
Says that you and Republicans are lying about FEMA siphoning their funds to send it to the migrant crisis that this administration has created. What's your answer to that?
Well, he's paid billions of dollars. He's giving money away to illegal aliens, as you would say, or illegal migrants. You can call whatever you want. The name is the same. The people that come into our country illegally, many of them are murderers. Many of them are drug dealers and gang members. The crime rates all over the world are going down because their criminals are being dumped into our country at levels that nobody's ever seen before. Yeah. It's an absolute outrage what they've done to our country at the border and what they've done with respect to inflation and energy and stupid electric car mandates where everybody's going to have an electric car in a short period of time, and they don't want all electric cars. And by the way, electric cars are fine for a certain percentage of the market, but you have to have gasoline propelled cars. You have to have, I would say, hybrids are very good, and new things are coming out. Yeah. But it's just ridiculous. These people truly don't know what they're doing.
You know, Kamala,
I refuse to believe that most Republicans don't see that and know that he's unwell and know that he is unfit to serve. They insist that he's fine and that Biden was the only one with a problem. Now they're even saying, oh, Kamala Harris might have a cognitive issue because Trump has started saying it. But I think deep down, most of these right-wingers see this stuff and they know something's wrong with Trump. They would just still prefer it over Kamala Harris, and that's a really sad commentary. There's a few Republicans who are willing to say it. Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and some others, some former Trump staffers. I'm not a left-winger, they say, but it's about fitness, and it's about supporting democracy. I have to support Kamala Harris, or at least I'm not voting Trump, as Mitt Romney has said. I think there's a lot of Republican voters who see it, and they may just be too scared to admit it publicly. We'll see how they vote. If you value what we do at The David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind-the-scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial-free daily show. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. It is time for what is normally called Friday Feedback one day early. Let's take a look at what's come in from you as far as questions, critiques, praise occasionally, rarely, but occasionally. You can always email info@davidpakman.com if you have anything to ask about, comment on, or critique. I take the critiques and I believe I take them well. I take criticism well, right? Sure. Better than Trump, I think. Let's get right into it. Now, many of you have expressed concern for me and concern for the show. David, what happens if Kamala Harris wins and it's the end of MAGA? Is the David Pakman Show going to end? Here's one such example. User ABC24611 on Reddit says, what will happen to the Pakman Show if Harris wins in November? I love David. I've been listening pretty much since Trump got elected. I've never really known the show without Trump. I think like a lot of people, I'm feeling fatigue. So tired about hearing about Trump. Assuming Harris wins, where do you see the show going? Obviously, there will be a lot of the aftermath around Trump's court cases, but do you think David will steer the show in a more general political direction or focus on world news? Have a good weekend. So listen, there have been concerns about will the show survive every single time we've had a new president. When Barack Obama defeated George W. Bush, I got emails, David, now that you're the in party versus the out party, Will the show survive? And the show was bigger than it had ever been at the end of Obama's first term. When Obama got reelected and there was no more challenge from Romney, David, now what happens? What happens to the show? It's so boring. Few years went by, the show continued to grow, and then Trump bursts on the scene. Trump wins. David, now the world and the country has gone right wing. Can you survive? And of course, Trump generated significant interest in politics. Another record-setting 4-year period of growth. And then Joe Biden won. Oh my goodness, David, we defeated Trump. It's over. Interest is going to wane. And the show grew and grew and grew and grew. And we had the best year ever from the standpoint of views during Biden. We had the best month ever this past August, the second best month ever last month, September, that just finished. So I don't have the answer. I don't know what is going to be the biggest threat to our country if Kamala Harris wins. If Trump wins, I think it'll be Trump. I don't know what happens if Kamala Harris wins. But what I can tell you is that if the 2008, 2012, 2016, 2020, 2022, if all the past elections have been any indicator, it is that more and more people are engaging with politics through social media platforms and online means that we inhabit. And I believe there will always be a need to keep those in power accountable. So I'm not worried, but I don't know what the show will look like in a year. I never know. That's the reality. Now, here's another view. Randy Koger on YouTube said, David, I think it's maybe time you just give up this channel. You know, it's so funny. For a decade, I get messages about how the show is circling the drain and it will clearly be over soon because we are failing. And every single year, we get to a new record number of subscribers, now beyond 2.5 million, approaching 2.6 million, on the way to 3 million. Why on earth would I give up the channel when we are on the way to the biggest audience we've ever had in 2024? Not this time, Randy, not this time. All right, let's get to some other non-show related things. Magnus64 wrote on Reddit, David, sir, could we get a little more positivity when it comes to the election forecasts? More Kamala landslide scenarios instead of Debbie Downer, doom and gloom, Trump could still win stuff. Respectfully, it's not 2016, and there's room for a more optimistic approach. Magnus insists that it's not about people getting complacent. We all must vote, but it's about optimism. You know, this is exactly the sort of email that misunderstands what this show is. This show is not about generating more optimism by talking about possible Kamala landslides. I've laid it out for you as I see it. Could Trump win in a landslide? No, I just don't think so. I don't think so. If Trump's going to win, he will win narrowly electorally and lose the popular vote. Could Kamala Harris win in a landslide? Yes, I believe she could, although I don't believe it's the most likely scenario. I think the most likely scenario right now is Kamala wins, but by a smaller margin than Biden won in 2020. And once you acknowledge that the polls point to a smaller Harris win than what Biden had in 2020, that gets us down to where one state could be the difference maker. I'll tell you again how I landed this scenario. Biden won with just over 300 electoral votes. Right now, Kamala Harris is leading all the states Biden won, except for Georgia and except for Arizona. If you flip Georgia and Arizona from blue to red, it leaves Kamala Harris with, I'm going from memory, 276 or 278 electoral votes. That means if she loses any additional swing state, Trump wins. Why would I be gloriously optimistic about the most likely scenario, which is, yes, Kamala with the edge electorally, but hinging on any one battleground state? So we're going to have the results in a month, unless something really weird happens and it takes longer, but we'll have the results in a month. I don't think there's any reason for more optimism than I've put forward. I'm giving you the realistic scenario. I think Kamala has the edge, probably a smaller margin than Biden had in 2020. Trump could still win. That's where we are. And I'm always going to just give you the situation as I see it. Inappropriate Fab commented on YouTube, Trump is too old to be president. I don't know if this is satire, but when President Biden decided to step aside and Kamala Harris became the presumptive nominee, I both seriously and semi-satirically tweeted, is this really when we need the oldest major party nominee in American history? Trump is the oldest major party presidential nominee in American history. And if you believed that Joe Biden was too old to be president again, I don't know how you can argue that Trump is not too old to be president. And that belief combination encompasses at least millions of Trump supporters, if not tens of millions. So it brings up a very good point. We did a poll on the YouTube channel. The question was, do endorsements from Bush-era Republicans like Dick Cheney help or hurt Kamala Harris? 70% of you believe that a Cheney endorsement helps Kamala. 6% of you believe a Cheney endorsement hurts Kamala. And 23% of you, roughly a quarter, believe that a Cheney endorsement for Kamala doesn't make a difference. I lean towards doesn't make a difference and maybe helps a little bit. I've said to you all before, there is a small sliver of the left that when Adam Kinzinger or Liz Cheney or Dick Cheney or whoever endorse Kamala, there's a sliver of people on the left who gleefully say, I told you, Kamala's a right winger, and that's why these Republicans support her. And of course, you can evaluate that for yourself. On what political issue does Dick Cheney or does Liz Cheney agree with Kamala Harris? Almost none. It is not because Kamala Harris is right wing that they are supporting her. It is because they want to go back to a form of conservatism that, while I disagree with it, is much less dangerous and insane than the right-wing reactionary nature of Trump, which threatens democracy at its core and has been a disaster for the Republican Party. Cheney doesn't support Kamala because Kamala's right-wing. Cheney supports Kamala because he believes that Trump would prevent the Republican Party from figuring out how to reinvent itself and maybe not wither and die over the next 4 to 8 years. So back to the poll. I think for the most part, people don't really care that Cheney endorsed Kamala, but I do think it might convince some reluctant Trump supporters, hey, you know what? I don't have to do this, fortunately. I don't have to do this. Heyo Mateo said, just happened upon your channel. I must commend you on your Trump derangement syndrome. It's up there at the highest levels I've witnessed. So thank you. It's been very entertaining, to say the least. Win or lose, whatever the outcome, I'll be back for your emotional response. Either way, it's sure to be uber pathetic. That's a very nice turtleneck sweater, by the way. The color suits you, matches your personality. Yeah, listen, I'm so sorry, guys. I'm going to be completely frank with you. If Trump wins, it would be really good for my show. So people who think I'm going to cry on election night if Trump wins, you just don't understand my job. Yes, it will be terrible for the country if Trump wins. I have done, and I'm comfortable saying, I will have left it all on the field. I have done and will have done everything I could to convince people Trump's a bad idea. In blue states like New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, etc., we are relatively insulated from a lot of what Trump will do. Trump winning will be really bad for the people in red states. It will be less bad for the people in blue states. The show will do well if Trump wins. So if you're waiting for me to sob and cry that Trump won, it's not going to be this show where you're going to find that. I'm voting against him. I'm advocating against him. But the idea that I'm the one who will suffer if Trump wins, that's not why I'm voting for Kamala. Too bad 55 with a little bit of praise. I like this. David, you're the sharpest tool in the shed. Nobody else compares. There are others on the left that have their own methods and styles, but yours is almost perfect. Nothing is perfect, but I can always listen to you. You speak clearly, and there is no mistake understanding you. Thank you. Well, I appreciate this. As I've said many times before, disagree with me, agree with me, watch the show, don't watch the show, cancel my podcast, whatever, right? I will always tell you what I really believe about things. This is not a show where I get Russian influencer money and then start modifying my views. This is not a show where 10 layers of editors tell me what I can or can't talk about, or say, you might want to stake out a different position on this issue so it's more palatable. Whatever you see and hear on the show is genuinely what I believe, for better or for worse. Monkey Ball on YouTube says about the Cheney endorsement, I should have done these in a different order, about the Cheney endorsement of Kamala. Most of the Democrat anti-war, traditionally liberal types who thought Cheney was a war criminal back in the early 2000s have mostly moved on to support Trump anyway, so they probably don't care that Cheney endorsed Kamala. So I don't agree with the premise. Most of the traditionally anti-war people that were against Cheney during the Iraq War are voting for Kamala. But there is this kind of tanky revolutionary left wing, some of whom have gone to Trump because they have convinced themselves that Trump is less bad than Kamala Harris. Really backwards thinking in so many different ways, but they've convinced themselves. And to some degree, the people that would be angry about Cheney supporting Kamala are supporting Trump. And that's a really weird horseshoe theory, politics makes strange bedfellows sort of situation. All right, we've got a great bonus show for you today. Make sure you're subscribed at joinpacman.com, and now officially in pre-order. Please make a pre-order for my forthcoming nonfiction book, The Echo Machine. It's available at davidpacman.com/echo, on Barnes & Noble, on Amazon, on Audible, on Apple Audio Books. You can also call any local bookstore. The way I would handle it is I would say, hi, I'd like to pre-order a book from Beacon Press. They will say, sure, what's the book? You say, The Echo Machine by David Pacman. They say, sir or ma'am, you couldn't have pre-ordered a better book. And then when the book comes in, they call you. It's a great thing. If you have pre-ordered, make sure to sign up for your free extras at davidpacman.com/free book stuff. No matter when you pre-ordered, you get the free stuff. Go to davidpacman.com/free book stuff. See you on the bonus show. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. 8 Sleep makes a product that is amazing, which I love. It's called The Pod, and it fits around your existing mattress and cools down your bed so you can sleep better. They just released the newest model called the Pod 4 Ultra, which in addition to cooling down or heating up your bed, can even lift up your head when you're snoring so you can breathe better. It's incredible. To get $350 off, go to 8sleep.com/Pacman and use code Pacman. The link is in the description.